Welcome to Moments in Leadership. My guest today is Lieutenant General Ben Watson of the United States Marine Corps. A native of Syracuse, New York, Lieutenant General Watson graduated from Cornell University in 1991 with a degree in history and was commissioned through the Navy ROTC program. After infantry officers course, he began a career that would span more than 3 decades and 2 combat theaters and some of the most consequential commands in the Marine Corps. But before we get into it, a sincere thank you to our Supercast supporters. Your support makes this podcast possible, and I'm grateful for each and every one of you. I also want to thank Major Brad Schell and Major Hector Afante for their help in coordinating Lieutenant General Watson's appearance today, and of course his son, Captain Josh Watson, for his assist in getting Lieutenant General Watson to say yes. And a special thank you to Kyle Gentry and Jim Lukeman here at the Marine Corps Museum for their teams for helping me get all of this set up. So back to Lieutenant General Watson. His operational career includes multiple MU deployments in the Balkans, combat in Iraq as a future operations planner with 1 MEF forward during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and then command of 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines in Helmand Province, Afghanistan during OEF. He returned to Helmand as a general officer, this time as commanding general of Task Force Southwest during Resolute Support and Freedom's Sentinel. Beyond his combat tours, Lieutenant General Watson commanded Marine Barracks, Washington 8th and I, handpicked by the Commandant, followed by command of Marine Corps Installations East and Camp Lejeune, the Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory and Futures Directorate, and the 1st Marine Division. Most recently, he served as Commanding General of Training and Education, responsible for how every Marine in the Corps is trained and developed. Lieutenant General Watson is now preparing to assume command of 3 MEF and Marine Forces Japan on Okinawa, the Corps' only permanently forward deployed force and the tip of the spear in the Indo-Pacific. Welcome, Lieutenant General Ben Watson. Thanks for coming out.
Dave.
Really appreciate it.
So, yeah.
This is great. So as I was reading that, I thought to myself, ROTC, does that kind of fall under you a little bit? What is the...
No, our ROTC really falls under my friend who's been on here before, Bill Bowers.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. So what was Midshipman Watson like? If you can remember back, because just to level set, we're roughly the same age. I came in 90 and you were 91. So we pre-name tapes kind of, right?
Yep.
Still doing sit-ups.
A lot of common friends.
And kipping pull-ups. Yep. And a lot of common friends, right? I should give a shout out to some of them. Of course, Mike Martin, Matt Cooper.
Yeah, Tom Savage.
Tom Savage,
yeah.
Your friend coming in. And that's actually how we met the first time. I'll get to that story later. But I reflect back on my time in ROTC because I was an ROTC commission too, and I'm kind of wondering if you look back on yourself as midshipman. Did you see glimmers of what would become Lieutenant General Ben Watson, or are you a totally different person now?
Absolutely not. I'm not one of those guys who had, a long and storied family history of Marines dating back to, Bellwood and Iwo Jima. And I grew up in a, relatively liberal middle-class family. And, when I was in high school, my parents went through divorce, and I think I was just sort of searching for something to, something of, some sense of belonging and purpose, and looking for a way to pay for a college that wasn't Syracuse University where my dad taught. And I could have gone for free and lived at home. But instead, I wanted to get at least a little bit further away. And I don't remember how I stumbled into the ROTC scholarship, because it was not a common thing in my high school to go that direction. Yeah. But I did. And I think I had a vague sense of the value of service and wanting to do something that mattered. But it was really just a financial decision more than anything, is how do I pay for a school outside of my hometown?
Right. Yeah, same thing. Did you start out Navy and switch over to Marine option, or?
That's kind of funny. I mean, just to show you how ignorant I was. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I know I had an NROTC scholarship, and I show up at, they do an orientation week, which is really just a thrashing you for a week and introducing you to how to wear a uniform and the Naval Service customs and courtesies, and after PTing us a little bit, the gunny stomps out and says, okay, let's have all the Marine options over here and the Navy options over here. I had no idea whether I was but I thought, hey, that guy looks pretty tough, and that sounds cool. So I went over with the Marine options, and about 24 hours later, they figured out that I was not a Marine scholarship holder, and that didn't go so well for Midshipman Watson for the rest of the week. But but clearly, immediately, I knew that those were the folks that I identified with and
Right.
and wanted to be more like. But it took about, so I started looking into how to switch over to Marine option, but it took me a couple of years because my grades weren't very good.
Okay.
I had the PFT scores and everything, but my grades were pretty bad. So I found my way from math and computer science into a history major. And
Okay.
got better grades and was able to make the switch.
Yeah. This is unconfirmed, but it's possible that Midshipman Armstrong declared himself as a mechanical engineer major his freshman year just to get the scholarship and then switched it to international studies. But it's possible. But that's great. So, but if you reflect back on Midshipman Watson, what did you see yourself having a career?
No.
Are there aspects of you as a 18 to 21-year-old that still exist as General Watson now today? And what are those?
Sure. I think that, that sense of value and purpose that I was looking for, as a teenager, be part of something bigger than yourself. I know it sounds cliche, but I was really looking for that. I hadn't found that, and I was I didn't really have a great center at home at the time. And I think, the people that I saw all around me, in the Naval Service and the Marine Corps in particular, were people that I wanted to be like. I wanted to be close to. I wanted to do something that had meaning and value, and so I didn't go into it. So it immediately resonated with me, but I didn't necessarily see this, turning into a career. I just knew that it really felt good and felt like a purposeful life, and I loved hanging out with all the other people, the other fellow midshipmen at the time, and later Marines and sailors, and that has never left. And I just can't imagine every step along the way. I've thought, hey, is this just what I want to keep doing? And I just can't imagine leaving the people.
Right. Yeah, I had a very similar feeling about it as well. So what did you do for your first summer between your freshman and your sophomore year? Because you were a scholarship, you must have done something for the summer. Did you do a Marine thing or did you do a Navy
No, I
cruise?
was still Navy option. So I spent a month on a frigate,
Okay.
USS Blakely, sailing around the Caribbean, largely sitting in sonar and standing watch. It was miserable.
Okay.
Just reinforced my...
That's when you knew.
I knew for certain, if I didn't know before, that I did not want to do that. Although, they're obviously, best Navy in the world. And then I spent a really neat month on a sail cruise. They had the unit at Cornell had a 51-foot Morgan ketch, and one of the lieutenants there, Chris Carver, had been part of the America's Cup team. He was a submariner. And,
No kidding.
Yeah, and so he ran sail cruises during the summer, and I joined him in Bermuda, spent a few days in Bermuda getting the boat ready, and then got to sail from Bermuda back to the East Coast and up the coast to Maine.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really neat.
That's really great. So then Quartermid, what did you do on Quartermid?
I didn't do Quartermid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was, I needed to earn some money, and I got a waiver for Quartermid. I was sort of in between. I was applying to Marine option, but not there yet, and so I got a waiver to work that summer.
Okay.
And yeah.
And then eventual graduation and commissioning, and then TBS in summer-ish of 91. Okay, great. So what did you think at that point? Did you know you want to be an infantry officer, or did it take TBS for you to discover?
No, that was all I wanted to do. And I know, I still remember, that's infantry is the only thing I put on all my choices. And I was, they sent it back and said, redo it and put some different choices. And I sent it back with nothing but infantry on there. And eventually they just took it. And I figured they would either give me infantry or they would give me some, I don't know, something completely different, aviation supply or something completely different, because they didn't like the way I approached it. But
did you ever run into your TBS company staff at all out in the fleet afterwards?
I have. My SPC was a guy named Steve Chill, retired lieutenant colonel now, and I actually have run into him quite a bit. He's around the Quantico area, and good guy.
They must be proud when they see their lieutenants become generals.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I also always make sure and reflect back to them that it was the early leadership examples that that really set not just the kind of helped you start to refine your sense of identity as a leader, place to step off from, I guess I'd leave it at that. They
Yeah.
really had a big part in my early sort of sense of what good leaders do and who they are.
I had the same experience. So then fast forward, IOC, and then you eventually go where as a lieutenant?
I went to 3-8, 3rd Battalion
3-8.
Marines. Yeah.
Okay. So what was Lieutenant Watson like? And let me tell you why I love this question. Because every lieutenant right now wants to know what it was like for you, a successful career Marine officer, what it was like for them, what was hard for you back then, what were some things that you would do different. And so if you could think back on your time and answer the question in the context of that. And then I'd love to ask some follow-up questions about your first platoon sergeant and things like that. Like what were some of the successful parts of that relationship? If there was something to do over again?
Yeah.
Those kind of questions are always really popular to get answers to.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, I was well prepared by the basic school in IOC, just like, all the lieutenants today in terms of physical and mental toughness, technical and tactical proficiency, but, not a lot of experience and, still trying to figure out, how to operate, as a leader in that context. And I walked into kind of the stereotypical, I walk into my first rifle platoon and it's full of folks who have just come back from the Gulf War.
Right.
So, they're all got, 3 rows of ribbons and, pretty salty, most of them, corporals and senior, lance corporals and pretty cocky. And so
all combat action ribbons.
All combat action ribbons.
Right.
And
thank God for your national defense medal.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. And as it turned out, one of them was a high school friend of mine that had enlisted in the Marine Corps and I had lost track of, a guy named Sean Kelly.
Oh, that's an interesting reconnection.
Yeah. And I figured that out before I actually met the platoon. And so, I have a little bit of a sense of humor. So I arranged to have him come in. I had the platoon sergeant kind of convince him he was in big trouble and had to go in and report to the lieutenant. And
he didn't know you were coming in.
He didn't know I was coming in. And so
he comes
in and locks himself up and reports. And I started chewing his ass. I don't remember what for. And then I just started laughing. And he looked confused at first.
It took a second.
Yeah, it took a second. And then it was great to see him. But
that's a great story.
It was kind of small corps.
Right.
Reinforced all the time.
I know. And still to this day. Yeah. And it's just great.
I didn't have, though, when it came to platoon sergeants, I didn't have your idyllic, experience. I had a really good platoon sergeant when I checked in, experienced staff sergeant, was there for about a month. And then he PCS'd. And then after that, it was kind of a series of sergeants and corporals over time. Eventually got to another staff sergeant. But he was not very good. He had been out of the infantry for a while. And one of my first big leadership lessons from my company commander at the time, I would say my biggest critique of Lieutenant Watson, and this, I could reinforce this on a number of levels, was I really, I saw things as a 1 or a 0, kind of black and white. You're either a tough, committed, hardworking Marine or, you got work to do. I didn't really, and I'm, it's something I'm not proud of now. And it's something that I have really, I think, learned from and worked on over time. But I didn't really embrace, and internalize the idea that inspiration is the thing a leader brings most importantly to the team and to the fight. And that, if we all had 300 PFTers who knew all their stuff, there would be no need for lieutenants and staff sergeants and folks like that.
Great point.
And so your job is to put folks in a position to succeed and try to get the most out of them. And instead, I was more judgmental. And I was not, I lacked empathy, I think, as an early in my career in a way that I could have been better. But so lesson number 1, I go to my company commander after trying to work with his staff sergeant for a little bit, and I said, I was like, this guy sucks. He is not cutting it. He's not physically fit. He doesn't know stuff. Blah blah blah. And my company commander, he's like, lock it up, Lieutenant. And he gave me my first great ass chewing.
Really?
And he said, this guy has spent 14 years in the Marine Corps, like 10 times more than you have. He rates an opportunity to be told where he is deficient, and he rates your help to get him to improve. And he goes, you got to write this down. You got to counsel him. You got to evaluate him, and you got to give him time and your help to get him where he needs to go. And I mean, he ripped my ass, but it was a good lesson, and he was right. And he made me do it the right way. So I document it and then have sit down counselings and talk about how we're going to get better. And we did that. And in the end, after a few months of work, the outcome turned out in this case to be the same. But it was absolutely the right thing to do, and I deserved that ass.
Yeah,
I've tried to always remember that.
That's a really great story, because I think that a lot of lieutenants are going to go out and struggle. It's just a numbers game. Somebody's going to have a personality conflict with somebody. There's going to be some sort of misalignment of visions or things like that at that level, and that's really valuable for lieutenants to hear. What after that? Did you stay as an infantry platoon commander for what, like 2 years maybe, or?
I had about 1.5 years and one deployment as a rifle platoon commander, and then I was the company XO for 2 years.
Okay, deployment was a MEU or
both MEUs, 2 MEUs.
Okay,
yeah.
Tell me about your time as a lieutenant on a MEU. What were some of the things that, because a MEU is a different environment,
it is.
So you learn different lessons on a MEU than you learn in the barracks.
Yeah.
What were some things that you'll reflect back on there?
I loved being deployed on a MEU. I think that is really at the heart and soul of what Marines, our value proposition to the nation. But it's hard leading, especially when you're not, when you're actually on ship
Right.
and if you're not going anywhere for a while. Trying to deal with cramped conditions and limited resources and keep your Marines focused, and just the challenges, particularly for young enlisted Marines, of life on ship. I mean, you have no personal space. You're standing in line for long hours for chow, and just to get very little things done takes a lot of effort, and so it's hard to that inspiration thing. But yet you're on a piece of sovereign American territory in a relevant area of the world in the 3-point stance, ready to go if the
Right.
nation calls, and there's something exciting about that.
What company you in? Boat, helo?
I was in the mech company. So,
Mech company. Okay,
Yeah.
so you probably had some pretty heavy duty maintenance going on. I would imagine the Marines were participating in maintenance and stuff on this ship.
Absolutely, that too.
Yeah.
And, working with the Amtrackers at the time to develop a cohesive team and understand what their needs were, and yeah, it was good. But MEUs back then were also very different than they are today. In
I know.
the sense that pre 9/11, I mean, it was work hard, play hard.
Right.
And with the exception of, there were a couple of MEUs where we ended up, spending a lot of time just cutting squares in the ocean off the coast of former Yugoslavia during the conflicts there in the Balkans. I was on the MEU that did the O'Grady rescue and things like that. But we spent a lot of time on ship because of that. But when we weren't doing that, we were either ashore training hard, or we were on liberty in some exotic port in the Mediterranean. Middle East or North Africa, and it was kind of like gloves off. No handcuffs. You land, and there's multi-day tours. You can go all over Israel, all over Turkey.
That's how I remember it.
Yeah, trains up to Northern Europe, and disappear for a while and just have a great time.
Yeah. I loved my time on a MEU. It was probably the best part of my career. It was funny. I was talking to a captain. This was a couple years ago, who was getting ready to go out on a traditional MEU deployment. And I was asking him about, where their gear was, things like that, footprint on the ship and combat cargo officer. And none of what I said was, he was like, I don't really even know what you're talking about. I just know I'm getting on ship. I'm like, oh, you're going to learn a lot.
Yeah.
But it's a different kind of learning.
Yeah,
It
probably
really,
like you. I was a team embark officer for one of the deployments, and so I was responsible for loading the ship.
right.
So the coordination with the Navy, the detailed planning that's involved with trying to cram as much stuff as you can into the space
Right.
on board, and
So you were on one of the smaller ships then, because you were, right?
I was on a LPD and then an LSD,
Okay. So small ship life.
small ship life.
Right. Any unique challenges that you discovered there as a young officer, being on a small ship versus like the big Death Star?
Right.
Because I was on a small ship too, so I felt like there was a lot that I learned.
Yeah, I think. On the one hand, small ships are great in that you actually get some fresh air. You know, on the big deck, flight ops going on all the time. You know, there's a lot of times where you really don't get a chance to get out on the weather decks. But the small decks, it's really a kind of an intimate relationship with the ship crew, much smaller group. And so you can, I think it's easier to coordinate with them for things that the Marines really need, which is, you know, time to PT out in the fresh air, time to do small arms live fire and things off the deck and that sort of a thing. You get to know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
So I think that's a benefit.
That's really how I got to know Tom Savage really well too. We were our staterooms were next to each other, so we were the best spades team on the ship too. So, but it was a small ship, so I can't really, I don't know where we stacked out in the whole MEU, but we were formidable. I was recently having a conversation with another guest about how influential the group of lieutenants were in my first artillery battalion. And I don't know if you refer to them like this, but we said the LPA, the Lieutenant Protective Association. I don't know if that term still exists, but it did for you too. What was your LPA like? Mine was really exacting and holding standards of the behavior of lieutenants. And it was really, it was a massive force. Did you have something like that too?
I think my first deployment, I think we did. I mean, both times, you know, I was on so broadly during my lieutenant tour, yes. You know, when you got on ship, then it got to be much more compartmentalized. You know, we had one rifle company on the ship. One of my deployments, 2 rifle companies, the other deployment. And I think it was a pretty tight group, but I would say that we tended to coalesce more around company than battalion at the time.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. What happened after platoon commander time? Oh, you said XO.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that's where I really, you know, this is one, you know, when I kind of get, you know, to sort of build on the, you know, what have I learned? Where could I have been better? I think, so my early leadership examples, you know, and I alluded to it earlier, I could give a whole bunch of more specific examples too, but, you know, you know, it was not a very, you know, nurturing kind of leadership. It was tough guy leadership. And, and there were always, you know, there were several bad guys, you know, and there was always at least one, you know, when you come to CO and XO and things like that, there was always at least one bad guy, one good guy. As it
little good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, good cop, bad cop, that sort of thing. And I think so, you know, when I became an XO, those were the sort of, you know, within my company, you know, that was the sort of, those were the sort of, you know, role models I had. And then when I became an XO, I had a company commander come in he was really great company commander. I stay in touch with him still. And he was a soft-spoken, you know, kind of a quiet guy, really hardworking, really proficient, really good leader, but not an ass chewer or anything like that. And I had always had an ass chewer. I mean, there had always been somebody who was so
reference your story from before, right?
Yeah, and in that case, you know, both CO and XO. So I think in my still immature leadership style, felt like, okay, what I need to do to complement this company commander is I got to be the hard guy. And so again, to the empathy thing, you know, we had particularly manifest with lieutenants. You know, we had a few good lieutenants and we had a couple that were, you know, not as mature or struggled a little bit. And, you know, and I wrote them pretty hard. You know, I did and tried to hold them to pretty high standards, but I was not, you know, I wasn't that inspirational leader when it came to the lieutenants. I really believed in the moral obligation of, you know, the officer to provide good leadership and to, you know, to be that, you know, example but instead of really getting down on a knee and trying to make, you know, those lieutenants who were kind of struggling a bit, instead of, you know, trying to make them better, make us better by making them better, you know, I wrote them pretty hard. And, you know, there was a point at which, you know, one of them, you know, towards the end of the deployment came up to me, he said, why do you have to be such a jerk?
Yeah.
And he used a stronger word than jerk.
Okay.
But, and that
I can beep things out if you want me to.
it was like a punch in the face. And I, you know, but it was one I needed. And I remember that. And it caused me to kind of take a step back and reevaluate and realize, you know what? He's absolutely right. I could have worked a lot harder to make them successful, make them better, and help them be the best version of themselves. Instead, I just held them accountable for their behavior and their knowledge and their, you know, conduct and stuff like that. And that's, you know, that's okay. And I mean, and it doesn't mean I was a, you know, terrible XO. I mean, I was, I had my strengths, but in that particular respect, as it relates to your question about the LPA and things like that. I was not the best version of Ben Watson. And
so rewind. What's the adjustment that you wish you could go back in time and make? More balanced? You think?
Yeah,
Is that the...
I think I would have, and this is something I have taken the rest of my career, and I'm always hypersensitive to this when I move into a new command or a new team. Is that I think that the best philosophy that a leader can embody and can insist upon, particularly as you grow into larger organizations with staffs, is that we will best succeed through the success of our subordinates. If we can focus on being the first unit in history that folks actually look up and go, hey, they're higher headquarters. They actually are here to help. Mm-hmm. And we are focused on making them successful, then we as an organization will be successful. And I think that's a powerful sort of leadership approach. And I've seen it done both ways. Like I said, as a lieutenant, I was more of the, hey, how come you're not meeting my standard, instead of how do I help you be the best version of yourself and the best leader you can be. So I have taken that lesson on ever since.
Yeah, I think I could reflect back on my time as lieutenant and say the same. There were some things I wish I could go back and do, and a lot of it's just personality based, but some of that's maturity too. I mean, you become
absolutely
older and you reflect on yourself and you say, I also have this theory. Tell me if you think this is crazy, but you and I are the product of some Hollywood versions of the Marine Corps from the 80s, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So you think like Great Santini, Gunny Highway, Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, things like that.
All that resonated.
And all of those bigger than life figures, characters, they were big, yeller, right. And I just think that had an impact on our generation. And when I ask somebody now if they've ever seen The Great Santini, they don't even know a movie. I'm talking like the young kids, they haven't seen it. But I think that was because we didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
So you knew what you knew, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, and so I don't mean I would go back and lower the standard, but I would have been part of the solution, for those particular, leaders. I would have, been more focused on how to make them successful than how to hold them to account for their for their knowledge and behavior and decisions and things like that.
What at that point as the XO, you're probably dealing a lot with the first sergeant.
Yeah.
Good relationship there. Did you learn anything there from that enlisted officer teamwork?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have had more different first sergeants. I mean, the one I had as a platoon commander was, I mean, he was the Full Metal Jacket version. I mean, he was the Vietnam Recon Marine. Hey, First Sergeant, we got Lance Corporal so and so here. He's suspected of doing this wrong. He doesn't look like a thief. Bring him back when he looks like a thief. He'd be like, he was a tough guy. And and then after that, we had a guy who again, my first sergeant unfortunately passed away, but the next one was the opposite. He was really a small little angry Irish guy from coming from the supply community.
Okay.
And he's wonderful guy. He's a good friend to today, but complete fish out of water in the infantry community, and knew it, and actively he joked about it, and but he was not this kind of guy who's going to come in and start holding stand. He was going to do the administration. He was providing a lot of the color commentary and and humor and support to the CO, but not a
totally different
a little bit of fish out of water.
Yeah. So fast forward, what did you do after your battalion time? What was your B billet?
Best B billet of my career. I had an opportunity to go to the basic school.
Oh wow!
And teach at the basic school, and then go over to the infantry officer course and teach.
Okay, I didn't know that about your career. Oh, I got a ton of questions now.
Yeah, and I tell you, I mean, my son, my Marine son, just the other day, he knows most of my friends, and he said, "Dad, it seems like almost all of your best friends date back to your time as a captain at the basic school." And I said, "Yeah, with the exception of a couple like Tom Savage." They really do. And it's amazing when I reflect back on the caliber of the folks that were there. And I mean, holy cow, what a learning laboratory. I mean, as an example, working back a little from, back then they had 8 captains at the infantry officer course. So now they have almost
Okay.
twice that. But the POI is more aggressive, and they deploy to 29 Palms for a couple of weeks. They do a lot that requires that level of oversight. But we had 8, and of the kind of core 8 that I was there with, 5 of them are now 2-3-star generals.
Oh, really?
Which has got to be an anomaly. But
Yeah, who are they?
Dave Odom,
Sure.
Cal Worth, Jason Morris, Rob Fulford.
Yeah.
Me, and then you had guys, Clay Tipton goes on to be a MU commander.
Okay.
A lot of folks like that. And then, TBS time too. Steve Skolenka, who's going to retire next week as a 3-star. Julie Nethercott, Farrell Sullivan. I mean, there's a whole bunch of really talented folks that you were surrounded by that went on, if not to be general officers, to be, regimental MU commanders. And, so you were just surrounded by this incredible talent. And you go from being kind of big fish in a small pond to, wow, I'm not that good,
Yeah.
But they were, because everybody respected each other professionally and worked really hard, and cared about what they were doing, we all became lifelong friends.
Enjoying moments in leadership? Help the project get more guests and reach more listeners by leaving a 5-star rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It takes like 5, maybe 10 seconds to do the reviews. And it really helps me to continue bringing on inspiring stories from senior military leaders. Additionally, when guests see that it's popular or hear about it in their commands, it helps me get them on as guests. I say the same thing to a lot of my friends and any younger person that will listen to me. It's like 1 out of every 10 people. But the friends that you make when you're a lieutenant and a captain, there is a component of that group that will be your lifelong friends forever.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing, because I can't say that about a whole lot of other groups. I do have a tight group of college friends, but for the most part, my lieutenant friends, we're still really, really tight.
Yeah.
And that's great. So you must have done TBS time and then IOC?
I did about a year and a half.
Okay.
Just in the bullpen, teaching tactics at TBS. I didn't get a chance to be an SPC. It was kind of an either or, and they sent me over to IOC.
IOC, okay. So I'm interested, after just hearing about some of your lieutenant time and how you were really hard on the lieutenants, what was then senior first lieutenant, junior captain Watson like at TBS, surrounded by all these lieutenants? Did that personality kind of carry into then, or did you start to mold into a different personality at that point?
No, I definitely started to, apply the lessons learned from my lieutenant tour in the fleet and become a more kind of empathetic leader, focused on how do you make people successful, not just running around kicking them for making mistakes.
Right. I think that's, empathy being, a new addition to our lexicon. But I do agree. I think that the empathy piece is a huge part of maturing and leading as a junior officer. And the faster you learn it, the better, because everybody's got their own thing. We all became Marines for the same thing. Right. There's some different versions of the word small dog or puppy to why people came in the Marine Corps. We all came in for the same thing. Yeah. And everybody wants to do their best.
And I think that's exactly the right point, is that, when I really internalized the idea that what you just said, everybody joins the Marine Corps. Nobody joins the Marine Corps to be, to suck. Some succeed, as a commandant likes to say, some succeed in spite of themselves, but nobody joins for that reason. So if you really start with the premise that everybody generally is pedaling like hell in the direction they think they're supposed to be going, and if they're going in the wrong direction, it's probably because they need some help or some guidance or a better azimuth, and you have the opportunity to provide that and channel that energy into the right direction and help them recover if they're losing it, their sense of purpose and inspiration. And because it's really for the Corps, it's about combat power. I mean, we don't have unlimited numbers of humans, and the recruiting environment, always, although the Marine Corps always makes mission, it remains challenging. And so we really can't afford to lose folks. And the more we can do through leadership to help make the Marines that we have stick around and be the best version of themselves, the better the Corps is. Right. Otherwise, we're just hemorrhaging combat power because we haven't done the varsity level leadership required to make people successful.
Yeah, interesting. Back to the TBS IOC time. So I'm going to kind of fast forward into your IOC time because I'm interested in this. I feel like IOC even back in the 90s, pre-GWAT, was still a very difficult course.
Yeah.
And so if you're a lieutenant that's assessing, I'll say, up into IOC, I don't think that a lot of people who don't want to be infantry officers are assigned infantry. Is that a fair assessment?
I think
it was nobody's
yes.
second choice.
I mean, they still do the thirds system, right? So at the basic school. So there are some that will get assigned that it's not their first choice, but nobody is going to get assigned that absolutely doesn't want to do it. You know, it's going to be one of your top choices if you're going to go over there.
But they're all coming in physically fit and everything. Oh, yeah. But there must be some attrition out of IOC, or there must have been some attrition out of it. Was there a common denominator? Was it physical? Was it just judgment? Was it just bad personality fit? What were some characteristics of people you saw that really didn't do well at IOC as a lieutenant?
So I guess I would say when I went through IOC, there really wasn't much attrition. I think we lost one in the entire course. Attrition, for the last 15, 20 years has been much higher. It's been in the, teens, low teens in terms of attrition. It is often physical. And I talk to every IOC class and in my current job, and I tell them, hey, I'd love to come in here and give you the old, back in the old days, when it was really hard.
Didn't have name tapes on our campus.
It's much harder today.
Yeah.
Like IOC it was really hard, when I was a lieutenant. It's much harder today. It is much more professionally run. It's a much more standards-based, and I'm, it's a difficult course. And so, it's a lot of pounding, it's a lot of weight. And so we lose a certain percentage just due to injuries. You lose, a little bit, of due to, academics and leadership and things like that. But most of the time it's injury. So those folks, there is a deliberate rehabilitation program to give them an opportunity to, reset, rehabilitate, and then get back into the next available course.
Well, that's smart. Yeah. You said you want to bleed that combat power off right out the get-go.
That's right. So the goal is to make them successful, but IOC still maintains a very high standard. And so.
Yeah, I know it's much harder than when our generation went through IOC. Probably TBS too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way.
And when this is why I crack up a little bit too, because I'll just say this, OCS, that was hard for me.
Yeah.
Like physically, that was a hard event for me. And then TBS was hard in a different way. And then artillery school was hard because there's a lot of math. But as I look at it now, I look at TBS and think, okay, that curriculum looks totally different than when I went through. And everything looks harder to me now. So I think OCS looks a lot harder than when I went through it, TBS and everything. But then when we see these things like, in the old days we would do this. Look, I don't know if the old days are necessarily the great. I think the way things are working now is much better. Yeah. And so I kind of want to fast forward into your. I'm going to jump ahead to your job now. But what are some of the big differences that you see at TBS, OCS? Let's say OCS, TBS. Let's leave IOC out of it. Just those two big. What's been an incredible improvement since when you and I went through those?
So I think, that there are significant improvements, particularly I'll start with TBS, in the standards-based nature of the leadership. They have almost eliminated large group lecture in favor of much more effective practical application and small group discussion, kind of the sand table approach. They do much more live fire. And I think they have implemented a character development program at the basic school that I think is a fundamental part of officership. And just really foundational to what we're looking for is not just great warfighters, but good officers, men and women of character.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you go over to TBS and talk to a TBS class, what are some of the questions that the lieutenants are asking you? Like, what do those young men and women want to know about Lieutenant General Watson and his career and his experiences?
I mean, a lot of them ask the questions about, leadership, decision making at a young level, mistakes, things, think mistakes that you made and how you handled them, or how your leadership handled them. A lot of interest in unmanned systems. So a lot of them ask questions about where the Marine Corps is going, and whether we're on the right track, and why we're still flying manned aircraft, and those sorts of questions.
Yeah.
Sort of technology related questions.
That's interesting. I look at that, the generation that is that age now, and when I've seen a few general officers speak to the lieutenants, I'm amazed at the questions that they ask relative to the questions that you and I would ask.
I rarely hear what I would consider a dumb question. I mean, they're thoughtful, do their homework, and ask some tough questions to answer. They ask some questions about, force design and the direction the Marine Corps is headed and what it means to them and those sorts of things.
When you left then IOC, did you go back to the fleet? No, you must have gone to school.
I went to AWS.
Okay.
So I went to school for a year, and then I went to 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines.
Okay, so 2-6, go back there. Battalion staff for a while, and then company command?
I went straight into weapons company command.
Okay. So maybe you feel set up for this question, but we just talked about all your lieutenant time and all the lessons you learned, and then you had immersion with lieutenants at TBS, and then immersion with infantry lieutenants at IOC, and then you take a quick pit stop over to AWS to kind of cool off for a second, and now you're back leading infantry officers. What was that like?
I mean, it was great. One, just no better place to be, and I had a chance to do a couple more MU deployments at 2-6. I had a great group of peers at 2-6, so it was kind of like the CPA, the Captain's Protective Association, and 2-6 at the time also had a really strong LPA. So at echelon, there were some really cohesive groups of folks, and I understood much better. I think I knew a lot of the lieutenants because I had taught them coming through TBS or IOC in the battalion, so kind of had a network and some trust built, and I think I understood a lot better. I had a lot more practice at how to teach, coach, mentor, and get the best out of the lieutenants.
Yeah, because I look at captain time. It's when you're a lieutenant, you complain about everything, and then all of a sudden you're now becoming part of the institution as the captain, right? Because you're in charge of mentoring officers. I find that to be an interesting step in maturity as we progress through the Marine Corps. That lieutenant to captain, and now you're not that far removed from them.
That's right.
So what were some of the challenges that you faced now as an experienced captain, experienced with leading lieutenants? What continue to be some of your challenges there?
Well, I had a weapons company, and that's it's probably I guess the way I looked at it at the time, maybe a little bit less pure fun than a rifle company, but a lot more challenging because you're filling the role of the battalion's fire support coordinator, but you're also, commanding a company of Marines and different disciplines within the company with the mortars and the, machine guns and anti-armor, developing the maneuver elements for the battalion in terms of the combined anti-armor teams within the company. And then, so you're kind of bandwidth challenged in terms of filling your role, to some extent as a special staff member on the battalion staff in your fire support coordinator role, and then being a good down and in company commander.
Right. And imagine weapons company, you've got really experienced and technically proficient enlisted Marines across the weapons systems, right? The mortarmen and the tow gunners and javelins, I guess now. But the lieutenants are kind of percolating up from battalion out of rifle companies too, right? Any tips for, that's not the right way to ask the question. I'm going to re-ask the question. Any insight into what makes a smooth transition for a lieutenant into weapons company versus a tough transition into weapons company?
I think, the advantage in weapons company, my experience has been you generally get some of the very best lieutenants in the battalion.
Okay.
So there are already folks who have, been vetted and sort of shown indicators of having the maturity of leadership and the confidence and ability to operate a little more independently, maybe require a little less guidance. So I had some really, good lieutenants then, one of whom, Todd Mahar, I just retired down at Camp Lejeune, post-MU command a couple months ago, and
Oh, that's great.
Dave Emmel is the chief of staff of 2MEF now. I mean, some really top quality folks. So I think, there. It's a jump. It's such an intimate relationship in a rifle company between the company commander and the platoon commanders, and generally a cohesive unit. And now you're sort of training folks, your lieutenants, to be able to take direction and tasking from the battalion commander or the battalion operations officer. So you're much less often actually commanding them in the fight. You're training them to be able to operate at the battalion level and to provide support to the rifle companies.
Yeah.
And so there's just a little bit more required in terms of distributed operations and ability to take intent and operate off that. You've got to deal with a much more, you've got to deal with challenges across the warfighting functions, right? So you're not just, right flank, left flank, you're dealing with significant logistical challenges, command and control at distance often and range, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. At this point, you've had a lot of opportunity in your career to have bosses above you, right? You're battalion commander at this point. You're reporting to battalion commander at this point as a weapons company commander, but you've also spent some time as lieutenant and the TBS, right? You've probably been exposed to more majors than you had been previously. And I'm wondering if this is the appropriate time to ask the question, what was the best lesson that you learned from the worst leader in your orbit?
Best lesson from the worst leader. I think, lots of small examples. I'll just give a couple out there for kind of a menu. But, I remember as a young lieutenant when I checked into that first rifle company as a platoon commander and we're out doing company training, and I talked about, I had a company commander that was a pretty tough guy and very tough on us. And we were out there doing company battle drills, mechanized company battle drills. So, a few folks up there, on the objective is the enemy and, 3 platoons online and, over and over and over. And there was a point, and then we'd go back and huddle around the train model and he would give us our instructions for the next run. And there was one point I said, "Hey, sir," we had been taught at IOC to think and be collaborative. And I said, "Hey, sir, do you think maybe on this next one we could try, how about we do a base of fire with 2 platoons and we swing 1 platoon around the flank and try a flanking attack?" And he just looks at me with anger in his eyes and just says, "You want to wear the effing railroad tracks, Lieutenant?"
Oh, okay.
And do you? Just absolute bowing up and
right.
Man, and the lesson was, okay, in this company, we just shut up and follow orders. There's no teamwork required here, at least, and there's one boss.
Right.
That's something I've always remembered. I obviously, I didn't, and it was probably in the wrong way. That sort of, experience was, part of how I got, kind of headed and a little bit off axis as I moved into XO time, was that sort of a tone and tenor.
Right.
But I've always remembered that, and I've reflected back on that a lot. I would say another one is just to the point of succeeding through your subordinate units, to reinforce that. When I was a major gusting lieutenant colonel, and I was working for one of the regimental combat teams in Iraq, I had been on a MEF planner and got sent down to reinforce one of the regimental combat teams for a big operation they were doing, and I would sit through the command and staff briefs every other day.
And you're what rank at this point of this story? What rank were you in?
I was a major, selected for lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
I think I might have pinned on, but and I was just sitting in the kind of getting my feet under me at the RCT and they were going through significant events that had happened with the regimental commander, and the tone and tenor of the entire meeting was like, "What the hell are those guys doing down there? Like, good God, how could they make that? How could they let that happen? How do you let a Marine get in a position to step on an IED in that And it was just this constant harangue. And it was just the regimental staff.
Okay.
So you have these battalions out there in the battle space fighting distributed, battle space owners underneath the RCT, and the tone, and a lot of the regimental staff were young. They were lieutenants and staff NCOs and captains, and all they're getting in tone and tenor is how screwed up the battalions are. And it was just this constant, how do they get themselves in that kind of supply situation? And it was just a really toxic sort of an environment. And it, that was another thing that just reinforced to me. I mean, just the, that's what translated now. So when, the COMO or the SUPO or the LOGO or something is fielding a call for support from one of the battalions, their mindset is these guys are effed up and they better fix themselves, not how do we support our battalions and how do we set them up for success.
I guess there's a danger of setting the precedent to the COMO and the logistics officer when they think to themselves, well, the boss already thinks that these people are all screwed up, so I can be prickly or I can be not accommodative or something like that. It almost gives you the ability gives you the tacit permission to maybe be a little bit less collaborative because the boss already thinks they're messed up.
Yeah, I mean, if the difference between that and we succeed through the success of our subordinates, then in what I expect, if 3-1 has a problem or has, then the first thing if you come to me and tell me that, my first question is going to be, what are you doing to help them? How did we let them get in that situation? What are we doing to help them be successful and fix it? If that's the first question out of my mouth, it's a totally different mindset on the part of the staff officer than it is if you're weaponizing the comment. 3-1, has got a problem. Like those MFers, what the hell? How did that happen? This is bullshit. That's bad. I'm going to fire the CO. I mean, if he does that, if something like this happens again, it's just that's a totally different commander's intent and a totally different kind of leadership environment.
Right. Do you feel like now from your position as a lieutenant general, do you feel like maybe some of that, what you and I experienced from the older leadership has been softened out or changed through GWAT maybe, or maybe just generationally are leaders not quite as tough, tough's not the right word, but inappropriately inappropriate.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's a certain amount of, as you allude to, Marine Corps sort of culture and history that's just, hey, you got to be tough. You got to just shut up and take it. And, okay, got it. We can operate that way. It's not a question of whether we can. It's a question of how do we get the best version of them out of the Marines we have. How do we lead them to success? Because there's not a whole bunch of folks standing in line just waiting for you to snap your fingers and like, nope, didn't cut it. Give me another one. You're going to fight with who you have, and you're going to have to win with what you got. So you can either take what you got and make it, as good as it can possibly be. What I tell lieutenants when I talk to them is this is not about compromising standards. This is about ruthlessly enforcing standards, but you don't have to be a jerk in doing it.
Right.
Like you can do it in a clear and consistent way, hold the line, maintain high standards, but you don't have to be a jerk about it. You can, but I think, I don't know that that's always going to be. I mean, today's Marines are smart.
Yeah.
They really are. And they operate better when they want to be held accountable. They need to be held accountable. So you call balls and strikes when it comes to standards and conduct and all that kind of stuff. But you don't have to be, an asshole about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because I think what younger people these days just generally and generationally, what they want is they want you to invest in their success as a leader. And it's not that hard to do, but it's just a different mindset.
Yep.
And that's so
it's harder. It's a lot easier. Anybody can sit back and just throw spears and yell and be, and preach. I mean, it's a lot harder to invest and to like bring somebody up with you.
Right.
It takes more work. It takes more artful and nuanced leadership.
Yeah. I can't remember who the guest was, but somebody made the point that we were talking about, you're always going to have your 10%.
Yeah.
And they made the point that I need to spend the most time on the 10% because the other 90% already get it. Like I actually spend my time, rather than ignoring them, I spend the time on the 10% because if I can turn that half of that 10% back into, effective Marines, that's a leadership challenge and something they're really
Now
proud
you're fighting
of.
with 95%, not 90%.
That's right. Yeah.
And inches matter on the battlefield.
Your major time, I'm assuming there was command and staff probably baked in there somewhere. Did you have a staff job or anything outside of the infantry during your major time?
I came back from my deployment as a battalion OPSO for 2-6 kind of in the fall. So I sort of missed the recruiting station selection window because I was coming back too late from deployment.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, in a tongue-in-cheek, I mean,
Yeah.
in some ways, I know I would have learned a ton and been tested on a tour like that, but I didn't. So I went and taught at EWS.
Okay.
Which was another great opportunity.
Is that how you know Matt Cooper then?
It is. Yeah,
Okay.
Matt and I taught together there,
Okay.
and he was great, great friend and mentor, and just surrounded by Kyle Ellison and George Schreffler and Paul Nugent and just a ton of really amazing.
I know all those names.
Folks. Yeah, really good folks, and really lucky. And at the time, the monitor told me, he's like, you're never going anywhere. You can't. You want a second instructor tour? You're going to be like one trick pony. It's probably not going to go so well for you, but seems to have worked out okay.
See, I think it worked out just fine. So then now I'm jumping into like your battalion command time, 3-1, right? What were you facing walking in the door there? Were they just coming off a deployment? Like set the stage for me to ask some questions about your battalion command time.
So I had a really good ramp up in the sense that I went to school and then I went out to 1 MEF forward in Iraq. And had a chance to get to see at the MEF level. And then we came back, I went over to be the division plans officer. So a chance to just sort of spend some time around the headquarters at the division, which I had never done.
Okay.
And so if nothing else, just get a sense of like what breaks squelch,
Right.
like what do senior leaders care about? How do I, what are the priorities? How do you keep yourself out of trouble? What are you expected to communicate or not? And what problems are you expected to solve yourself? So that was a really good window.
Who's the division commander at the time?
Right when I got there, it was General Paxton, but then it became General Mills and General Waldhauser.
Okay.
So it was kind of a little bit of a quick turn through a couple, but it was a great experience. And then I went down in January of 2008 and took command of 3-1. They were just coming back from a MU deployment where they had gone into Iraq, and it was the 4th Iraq deployment in a row for the battalion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so at that point, I did not have any battalion level and below combat experience. So interesting, and we had a very tight turn. So I took command in January. We were deploying in June for 31st MU. So they're coming right off of MU, very quick turn into the next deployment, and a lot of personnel turnover, and so here I come in, and they've done Iraq. All the new guys come in and they want to go to combat, and we're going 31st MU. And there was definitely a little bit of a sense of, hey, we're getting the short stick here. As it turned out, that was probably the best thing that could have happened to that battalion because, I was really lucky. I had a chance to command for a little over 3 years and do 2 deployments
awesome.
with
Okay.
3-1. So we went 31st MU, and then we did an Afghanistan deployment. And we were much better, I believe, on that Afghanistan deployment because there was a spacer. Because after Iraq, Battle of Fallujah, a lot of tough combat, there was a little bit of a hardness and an edge and a callousness maybe in some folks that maybe wasn't as well suited to some of the more nuanced counterinsurgency fight that we were going to face in Afghanistan.
Okay.
So going on 31st MU, one, it was a lot of fun. We got to go to the Philippines and mainland Japan and Korea and do a lot of great training and got some shipboard time. But I think it also gave some like cross-culture, just some cultural experience to the team. Like took, hey, we weren't in a gunfight. Working with foreign partners, other cultures, for the new Marines in particular, and for the older Marines, working with folks who weren't shooting at them, working with allies and partners. It just took the temperature down, I think, in a helpful way. And so then when we came back and started training for Afghanistan, it was much easier to shape the leadership and get the team in the right mind frame for a much more nuanced fight.
Okay. Interesting. How was Okinawa? That
was great. It was fun. It was hot, but
yeah.
but it was fun. You have to got to win with what you got. So you got to take advantage of limited range and training areas and find ways to do it. But I mean, you can complement it with, there's lots of fun stuff. I mean, learn how to scuba dive. We had Friday night fights every Friday, within the company or within the battalion, and just stuff to kind of keep Marines busy and tired and make it fun.
Not in trouble.
Right. Not in trouble.
Yeah. So we're going to fast forward to your Afghanistan time then as a battalion commander. What were some of the things that were great from your training in Okinawa that carried forward successfully into Afghanistan? And then what were some of the lessons that you started to learn, like, we never saw that coming, or geez, we're going to have to learn this on the fly?
I think, I sort of hit the cultural thing. I think folks were receptive to having a non-kinetic relationship with our partners.
Okay.
And so, that was, I think, helpful because we really we had a pretty extended battle space in the Green Zone down in Garmsir, and it was sort of based on our predecessors who had been sort of clearing over time the Taliban from north to south, and then every battalion cleared a little further and kind of handed it off.
Okay.
And where we picked it up, so you had some companies operating in an area up north where we're really, doing just capacity building, working on governance and improving the, the training for the Afghan security forces and police and things like that. And then, you kind of get a little further south and it's much more counterinsurgency, a lot of heavy IEDs, not as much direct fire, but a lot of malign behavior and intimidation going on with the local officials and things like that. And so you kind of had to be on your game. And then further south, it was really, more of a gunfight, further south. And so we kind of had units dealing with all three different types of space, and then a battalion that's trying to figure out, how do you continue to move the security bubble, further and further south, stretched out over a pretty big area.
At this point, we've talked a lot about what were the lessons that you learned and what would you do over things like that. I want to ask you the complete opposite question. I want to ask you, at this point, you've got probably between 15 and 20 years in, right, at the battalion commander point. What were some of the things from your career that you were really proud of yourself for? Like you look back on, you say, I did a really good job at that, or...
I think I'll give you one like small tactical, and then one. I think probably the first time I really felt, really proud of myself as a leader was, and I took something from it that I stuck with me was, I had the really good fortune of going to Mountain Leaders course, summer Mountain Leaders course as a lieutenant.
Oh, nice.
And it was really hard, but work hard, play hard on the weekends, and high attrition, but a really great group of lifelong friends that came out of there. And after that, we moved into the winter, and the battalion went to Bridgeport. And the battalion commander at the time, who was the first leader I had that I really admired, Chris Gunther, phenomenal battalion commander and leader. So we went to Bridgeport in the winter, and he decided to build a battalion scout skier platoon.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of cool. And I was, I had grown up in Syracuse, and I was, pretty decent skier. And he basically picked the best skiers in the battalion, made them into a scout platoon, put me in command of them, like pulled me out of the rifle company, and then made us sort of an independent, like his reconnaissance unit. And every day, it was just cool. I mean, every day we had helicopters land in the meadow. We loaded up my 20-some Marines and me, and with our skis, flew up into the mountains, dropped off into the mountains, and then with an instructor, and just spent the whole day, skiing down the mountains back to the base camp. Learning how to pick routes and trails, and how to tactics for fighting in the winter and all that. It was just with all guys who could ski, which was great. And long story short, we come around to the final battalion exercise, and so he employs us as a reconnaissance unit out to set conditions for a battalion attack through the mountains onto an enemy assembly area. And as the battalion's moving, the battalion as a whole is limited. You're as fast as your weakest link. So there's still some folks who just cannot spell ski.
Right.
And the battalion's moving at a snail's pace. And we're out there, doing our thing, screening in front of the battalion and doing the reconnaissance of the objective. And this big blizzard blows in. And the battalion just ground to a halt and really was making no progress. And our mission, we had a no later than. And the battalion command, I had the battalion commander's intent. I didn't have comms with them, but when it was clear they weren't going to make the timeline, me and my team basically scouted out the position, waited till the enemy, kind of went to ground because of the blizzard, and then we just skied in and ended it. And took the objective and then set everything up. So when the battalion finally struggled in hours later, at the tail end of the blizzard, objective was secure, everything was set. I had a tent going, hot wets for my company commander. And, it was fun. It was a neat story, but I was proud of the team and first opportunity to really operate kind of independently. But what I took from it also is that if you invest as a commander in a small group of like Marines of character and ability, then you can get an outsized return on investment. And so for most of my career, that was the Scout Sniper Platoon.
Okay.
And how good they were was always a function of the human capital and the investment that you put into that unit. Whether, the Scout Snipers had a reputation, sometimes really good, sometimes not so. Totally a function of how much the battalion commander invested in that unit, I believe.
Okay.
And the leadership you put in. But when you did it right, and I paid this forward in my time with 3-1, I got such an exponentially larger return on investment when we were in combat by making that investment into that small group of humans. And it comes at a cost, right? Those are fire team leaders and squad leaders that would otherwise be in a rifle company. That's, one of your best lieutenants and staff and COs. But in terms of setting conditions, in terms of helping you get the information you need to make good decisions, in terms of shaping the battlefield, a unit like that can really make an outsized impact.
Yeah, right.
And now I think has paid forward into TECOM, and they've had some stories recently about some of the great work that Mike Brooks and team at Training Command have done to reshape the reconnaissance training continuum, and
I read some articles on it. Yeah,
improve training for our scout platoons and things like that. I think that's going to be a difference maker.
Yeah, does the recon school fall underneath you?
It does.
I guess it does. Yeah, of course it does. Yeah, that's interesting. At this point in your career, this is one of my favorite questions, and only because it always elicits a pretty good story. But yeah, it's incumbent upon us as leaders, not just officer leaders, the enlisted leaders, all of them. At some point in your career, you're going to have to look somebody in the eye and say, "No, we're not doing that." Do you have a time where you remember saying no was uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Or maybe not a popular decision, and how did you overcome that and reconcile that with yourself and your own self-confidence?
Yeah, probably a few times. I'll give you the example. I'll give you because we haven't really talked about 8th and I, and that's such an historic place. I'll give you one from there.
Okay. Great. Then I'll ask some follow-up questions on 8th and I then.
And it's funny because when I was pending the results of the Colonel Command Board, I had a conversation with my wife at the time, and I said, "Look, I don't have any idea whether I'm going to get command. All I can promise you is that they won't send me to recruiting duty, and they won't send me to 8th and I, because I don't have any recruiting experience, and I'm like 5'10" on a good day, not that good looking, never known for my drill. So there's no way I'm going to, other than that, I don't know. We could go anywhere." And of course the list comes out and I'm going to 8th and I. So lots of, one of the things I talk to commanders about at our commanders courses is, law, policy, SOP, history, tradition. When somebody tells you that this is the way we do something, sort of make sure you know which bin this falls into.
Oh, great advice.
Because every Lance Corporal that's been around for a minute has since regiments hand down forever, or those who have gone before, we've always done it this way story, because that's just what happened to them during their first 6 months in the Marine Corps. And so you need to be really clear about that sort of thing. And 8th and I is a place where, like, strategic shock, getting selected for it, but a wonderful experience, really amazing. I think it's a big part of why my older son's in the Marine Corps now. He spent his junior and senior year of high school surrounded by these jack stud captains and staff NCOs putting their arm around him, and rifle butts hitting the deck on the sidewalk every morning as practice started. And so one of the things of the many traditions that you evaluate when you get there, we took, the Marines of 8th and I do, the thing they do the most is funerals at Arlington. And it's probably the most important thing that they do. They also do dignified transfers at Dover, but by the time I was the CO there, many less of those, thankfully, because major combat operations weren't producing a lot of casualties. But the funerals at Arlington, and they do joint ceremonies around D.C., and they get on these buses. You've seen them with the wraps on there, with the silent drill platoon.
Yep.
And when they get on these buses, the first time I get on, everybody's standing up. And I was like, I wonder what's going on here. And sure enough, they're like, sir, we don't sit down on the buses because, at 8th and I, you're trying to be perfect, represent the Marine Corps perfectly, or at least, your standard for error is so far, below the noise baseline for the average human that nobody but you is going to notice that something's wrong. And it was about the creases in the trousers. So when you put your trousers on at 8th and I, you did it standing up, so that when you got that perfect crease in the trousers, you didn't break it.
Okay.
So you put the trousers on standing up, and then you never sit down again until you're done with and ready to take the uniform off.
Kind of like we used to do with the old camis when you take it to dry clean to get it starched.
Yeah. So they're like, we don't sit down on the buses, and because that, then we get off the bus and you might have wrinkles, and it's going to more like doing funerals. This is too important. And I thought about that for a minute, and I went back and I talked to my sergeant major, and I was like, this is stupid. We're driving buses around local highways and DC traffic and stuff like that. Somebody's going to get in an accident. And I've got 50 Marines standing up on a bus with a huge plexiglass window in front. As soon as we get in an accident, was preserving the crease on the trousers, was that worth 5 dead Marines or a mass casualty because Marines were standing up on the am I going to be able to look anybody's parents in the eye and say, your son's dead or critically injured because the crease on the trousers was that important? I'm like, F no. No way. That just does not make any sense to me. And I said, I got it. And I called a couple of the old former COs and was like, hey, look, I understand tradition here, and I just got here, but this is dumb. And as you pulled the string back, it turned out that they used to wear, when I was there, we wore polyester trousers. And they, you really weren't going to do much damage by sitting down.
Right.
And if you did a little bit, you could chamois it up with, we could bring, some battered powdered iron or something like that. But historically they had worn cotton trousers.
Okay.
And it was a totally different story. Those actually looked like crap if you sat down in them and then got up afterwards. But nobody had questioned it when we shifted from cotton to polyester. And I don't know that it probably wasn't worth it when we were wearing cotton trousers, but that was the tradition. And it was one of those things like, sir, you better not change this kind of thing. And I did. I just said, this, I can't.
Yeah.
This is just stupid. And
what a valuable lesson.
What's that?
That's a valuable lesson. I mean, that's why I like this question. I always get a great story out of this.
Yeah, I don't know. But at the time, it felt like, curing cancer. It was, the ghosts of 8th and I are going to come out and, fire and flames. And
right.
But it was just, I think, not asking the right questions and not,
I think that's a great takeaway for leaders listening to this episode with you as a guest here, because I think everybody either has or will have some sort of story in their life where they had to say no to something. It was an unpopular decision. But I love the fact that you thought through it from the standpoint of how do I look somebody's parents in the eye and say, sorry, but the creases, it's the way we've always done it.
Yeah, the risk of somebody being upset that a Marine didn't have a perfect crease versus the risk of, it really wasn't a hard decision, but the environment made it a little bit of a challenging one.
The environment, let me ask you a question about that, because you make this decision, we're not going to do this anymore. Did you have a line outside your door of everybody that wanted to fight you on or try to change your mind? And
as it turned out, after I made it, I think everybody was relieved.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah, I didn't have anybody, I did a little bit of Napoleon's Corporal afterwards, and I think afterwards everybody was like, well, no crap, like,
Yeah.
it's about time.
Okay.
That was painful.
I think the thing that's interesting about Eighth and I to me is that, I mean, I know this to be true. It may be a little embarrassing when I say it to you, but that's a handpicked by the commandant, right? And it's one of the most visible posts in the Marine Corps, and you're commanding it as a colonel, right? So you've got flag officers rotating through there all the time, heads of state. You've got the full weight of the Marine Corps tradition on your shoulders. Forgive the way I phrase this, but how do you lead with confidence when you're almost always the junior person around?
Yeah. I think, that is, I mean, I look around now and, my kids laugh because, I never met a general until I was at least a major.
Okay.
And so that is a thing, right? Kind of culturally, in terms of, but I think, succeeding at Eighth and I is all about the environment that you set, and it's, you have to make it fun for the Marines that work there. And it's super stressful. There's a certain amount of it where you kind of go in there and you just recognize, like, this is either I'm going to do the best job I can and not worry about how it turns out. I'm going to make what I think are the right decisions. We're going to uphold standards, and we're going to try to make it a place that people want to protect. Understanding the fishbowl nature of it and the level of visibility, the way we want people to think about this is like, that doing the right thing is the cool thing to do. And if you, and we want folks looking out for each other and policing each other, not just being held accountable by their seniors. And if folks enjoy serving here and they recognize the value and the importance of this place, then they're going to look left and right and help make sure that the folks on their left and right are doing the right thing. And they're going to, if somebody's getting ready to get into a car after drinking, they're going to step in front and order them an Uber or give them a ride. They're going to look out for designated drivers. They're going to, and I think if you just create an environment in which folks have confidence that everybody is out to make you successful, then folks stop worrying about, saying exactly the right thing, or it just takes the temperature down, I think, in a way that's helpful. I don't know if that's a great answer, but
it's a great answer. It also sets me up for the next question, which is, okay, it's a colonel command, so it's an important command, obviously very high visibility, but it's no deployment, no operational commitments. I mean, you're not.
Yep, right, absolutely.
Okay. So, it's just about discipline, precision, tradition every single day in front of everyone all the time, to include the commandant, right? What did that command teach you about leadership that your other operational tours didn't?
I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to just emphasize, what Eighth and I does for the Corps. Just two quick things. One, it tells the Marine Corps story, and this is what I tried to make sure all the Marines understood. Through drill and ceremonies, and we tell the Marine Corps story to the rest of the American people, folks who have never met a Marine, don't know what the Marine Corps does. I mean, we help them understand and translate what the Marine Corps is and means to the nation. And the second thing we do is we instill confidence in lots of different audiences in their Marine Corps to do what the nation requires. And that includes our veterans, who are coming to the barracks to see, hey, do they still remember me? Did my service matter? So the historical part of the barracks is important. And they're also coming to look you up and down and see, did today's Marines still got it? Because I remember we were tough and we were disciplined and we inspired confidence, and did today's Marines still have it? And so the Marines of the barracks, that sort of perfect-ish atmosphere and environment, and kind of that is supposed to, it reinforce confidence in today's Marines, not just the American people, that today's Corps is still a place of discipline and esprit and values. What I learned from a leadership perspective, a lot of it was from the folks I was able to observe. I had a rare opportunity to work for 3 different commandants.
Okay.
tail end of General Amos, General Dunford's short commandancy, and then General Neller.
Okay.
And so the way they each approached it, and the way they, each led, as first time I had close exposure to a commandant of the Marine Corps, and they were obviously all there because they were extraordinary leaders, but could not be more different by personality.
Yeah. I'm curious to ask you real quick about your sergeant major when you had that command, because I sense it's a junior sergeant major. So is that difficult to have a junior sergeant major at such a high visibility command? How do you mentor your sergeant major in such a high visibility command like that? Were there challenges there?
I think not, there's probably a little bit, but nothing really statistically significant. I think 8th and I is a place where everybody just wants it to take care of itself. Nobody wants 8th and I to be needy.
Right.
They give it to the colonel and sergeant major, and everybody wants to show up at a parade and have everything go the way it's supposed to be, and then they want to walk out, and 8th and I can become what you don't want it to be is somebody else's problem. You just it's kind of the way I like to operate is, even though it's very high visibility, nobody's going to get in your business unless something's going very wrong. So as long as 8th and I does what it's supposed to do, you have really wide left and right lateral limits in how to command as a team, both with you and the sergeant major, and nobody gets really in your knickers.
Which is really what sounds to me like one of the most. It's what everybody wants when they command something.
Yep. So you know what the expectation is: mission type orders, don't F it up, and
Yeah. You're right.
And it's not like everybody thinks you eat breakfast with the commandant every morning, et cetera, and that's not what happens.
Yeah.
They've got day jobs. I mean, they just want you to make sure that their grass is mowed.
Everything looks good. Right, right.
When they show up.
I have a freelance question for you, so I'm kind of doing this offline. Sure. I'll edit this out, but can we talk about center house?
Yeah.
I'm curious. If you don't have a good answer for this, I'll skip the question. But the question would sound something like, I feel like it's the last true officers club. Yeah. That you and I grew up when you had to join the officers club, and now that's all kind of gone. And there's a staff and CO club over there too. I've been there as well. Yeah. But are there some leadership lessons that can come out of the social aspect of having your officers all kind of
absolutely
because they want to go there? Yeah. I feel like I know you and I are going to see each other in 2 weeks at Center House, and it'll be my first time back there for in many years. I've always looked at Center House as being an exclusive invite. It's always been a place that it should have a velvet rope outside, right? Because people want to be there. I also feel like it's one of the last functioning per the intent of an officers club anywhere, and maybe even the staff and CO club there as well. But what are some of the leadership things that you found important about having? What was unique and important about having that from a leadership perspective of a place for your officers to get together?
Yeah, I think that was really the center of gravity for what I talked about earlier in terms of cultivating an environment that folks want to protect. That became a place where we could all get together and in a professional way let our hair down, have fun, and just enjoy each other's company. I mean, we found a couple of guys that played guitar and one guy that played the fiddle, and that were within the team there, and would get them up every Friday night.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, just playing music, and they did skits, like really funny stuff, and a lot of them directed at me, but or other leaders.
Right, it was almost every Friday night was a roast.
It was like a little kangaroo court, and and we if you wanted to drink, I mean, you could drink, and it was really. It wasn't a 2-beer limit or anything like that. I mean, some folks went big, some folks not so much, but your choice. But it was a safe space, and the rules were like your uniform stays all the way on or it's all the way off. Like you don't come in there and start unbuttoning collars. And one, because it's the right thing to do, and we shouldn't equate having a uniform on with not being able to have fun. And then two, because you never knew who was going to walk in there in the middle of the night. I mean, you are in the commandant's backyard, and 3 stars live there, and so uniforms stayed on. But otherwise, I mean, folks would loud music and dancing and skits and fun and just tried to make. And I always stayed, so that was kind of my other thing. Is it would go till sometimes 2, 3 in the morning, and I was like, I wanted to be able to say that if anything happened, I owned it. I was there. So I stayed, until the wee hours, and made for some early Saturdays, but it was a great time, and it turned out, and we never, in the 2 years I was there, never once had an incident with a Liberty incident. No destructive behaviors or drunk driving or sexual harassment or assault or anything. It never won during the whole time I was there, because I think it made it enough fun that folks wanted to protect it, and they policed each other.
Yeah.
And it was
I
great.
think it's a very special place.
Yeah.
How about the Staff NCO Club? I've been invited there once. I really enjoyed it there. Got to meet Chesty, I guess, after the parade. Chesty comes through and things like that. But tell me real quick, is it same cultural impact on the Staff NCO Corps to have that facility there for them?
I think it, like Center House, it depends on the tone that the senior leader sets. So highly dependent on the sergeant major and whether the sergeant major really embraced that as a venue for the same kind of opportunity and environment as Center House.
Okay.
I had, for most of my time at 8th and I had a sergeant major named Joe Gray who was phenomenal, and he was determined to make Center House a place that folks would enjoy. It was sort of trending poorly when I got there. Joe embraced it, and Joe made it a place that staff NCOs could have a similar kind. But staff NCOs, more of them are married and have kids, and so they're less likely to party till the wee hours of the morning. So it wasn't quite, probably as rowdy, but it was a place that they made really special, and we always tried to make sure that the VIP guests that came to Center House had an opportunity to go over to the staff club as well and show some love to the staff NCOs, and so
that's great.
Yeah.
You ran the Warfighting Lab for about 3 years. And, that's a rare assignment, sitting at the intersection of doctrine and technology and the future force. What did you get right there? What do you think maybe you thought you were getting right, but turns out it didn't, if anything? And is there anything that kind of keeps you up at night about, geez, if something unravels, it could be this, or maybe we're not leading? And that may be a question you don't want to answer, which I appreciate, but that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Okay. Yeah, a lot to think about there. I mean, coming into the Warfighting Lab was, I took over from a, phenomenal officer, Christian Wortman.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's really, out at One Mouth now. And he, when he turned it over, I was, eyes wide open. I mean, especially the science and technology piece, stuff I was not super familiar with, and I knew it was going to be a steep learning curve, but I thought, this looks like a pretty steady, it was General Berger was DC CD&I, and for my first 2 weeks at the Warfighting Lab, I'm going to exaggerate just to be, tongue in cheek, but this is a nice, steady, steady job, not anything particularly radical or difficult, but, just a lot of stuff to learn and, interesting place to be. And then, 2 weeks later, General Berger becomes a commandant, drops Force Design 2030 on us, and, off to the races. So it accelerated quickly. I think the first thing, I'm a big believer in taking a campaigning approach to turnovers. The one thing that hurts us, and sometimes it's by default, is when you don't have much time to turn over, then each commander, the commandant refers to it as the reverse Pony Express. Mm-hmm. Now, you may have heard that before, but
actually I haven't. Can you explain that?
So he tells a great anecdote, and he says, hey, the old Pony Express ran, right? It was one rider, many horses. So that's how they got the mail across the country. A guy jumps on a horse, races it at light speed, to a way station, trades out for a new horse, gets on a fresh horse, takes the mail the next, and just does that, and riding fresh horse across country. The way we do command in the Marine Corps, it's the opposite. It's the reverse Pony Express. It's one horse, many riders. Okay. So same tired old horse.
Right, yes.
New commander hops on every couple of years.
Right.
Or every,
Navy Achievement Medal for the person that came up with that term. Yeah, that's good.
And right. And so I try hard, if it's not, when I go into a new place, new command, unless it's something, illegal, immoral, or unethical, not to make any immediate changes, is to take a few laps around the block and make sure you understand why the organization is doing things the way it's doing it, and so I often wait a minute before I issue, updated guidance and things like that. Probably the biggest thing I decided to change relatively early in my time at the Warfighting Lab, as there was this immediate pressurized demand signal for experimentation to validate or help us improve the initial force design guidance from the commandant. The way the warfighting lab tended to do experimentation was in a way that would make the experimentation as analytically bulletproof as possible. So they would a controlled environment, bring in an experimental unit, platoon, company, whatever, bring in technology, set parameters around the exercise, and then have very specific objectives that they would execute in a controlled environment to achieve, the analytic, results they were looking for or lessons they were looking for. And one, that was costly, and you couldn't scale it.
Okay.
And we were looking at, force design implemented a bunch of really like 30 weight changes and a different approach to kind of how we were doing business in a way that required us to think bigger and at scale and move faster. And so I said, we're not going to do experimentation here at McWill anymore. We're going to work by, with, and through the FMF. So I realized that analytically it will be impure. It won't be clean. There will be ways in which folks could question the results, the takeaways, the lessons, because the conditions were less controlled, and we're going to have to compromise. We're not going to get everything we're looking for, but on a couple of levels, I think we've got to start coordinating with and doing experimentation by, with, and through the FMF. So working it into the exercises and training they're already doing. One reason is because we can scale that way. By picking in, the size exercise, et cetera, type unit we want, and come to them, so it makes it less costly. We're moving fewer people. Two, if this force design thing is going to succeed, not a lot of people don't understand it right now. If we don't bring in the FMF and embark on this journey of learning, this campaign of learning with them, then it's going to remain a mystery, and we're going to sort of build walls in between the folks back here at headquarters Marine Corps and the folks in the FMF that are, feeling the downstream impact of the decisions that are being made.
Yeah. And then you went on to 1st Marine Division from there, right? Okay. So curious, because when I think about 1st Marine Division specifically, because that's my fam, right?
Yeah.
That's where I grew up.
Yeah.
A division, I'm probably wrong about this, but let me just say it. Like, a division to me seems like it probably runs itself pretty well. You got regimental commanders, they're 25-year-old seasoned colonels running things. Yep. But there had to have been leadership challenges as a division commander. What were they?
There absolutely were. But first, what the unbelievable honor of a lifetime, to command the Blue Diamond. It is.
I'm jealous of you.
It's something special. I still laugh at the commandant came to visit, and he was talking to a group of Marines down at 3rd Tracks, and took questions. Him and the sergeant major, and this one young Marine in the back raised his hand. Sir, Lance Corporal Campbell. He's like, yeah. What do you want? He goes, sir, we need to be able to wear patches back on our uniform.
Oh boy, here it goes.
Patches. The commandant's like, oh, really? That's interesting. What do you mean? Like on our dress uniform? He's like, yes, sir, on our alphas. And he goes, oh, so like divisions and MEFs ought to be able to wear like the unit patch. And he goes, no, sir, just the 1st Marine Division, just the Blue Diamond. We ought to be able to wear the Blue Diamond on our uniform. Nobody else.
Lance Corporal Campbell.
Yeah, and it was just that kind of spirit it's just such a, as you know, being a Blue Diamond veteran, historic. I think a couple of things, opportunity and a challenge. One opportunity was division schools is not, very well resourced at 1st Marine Division, or wasn't, and it's all out of hide. You don't really have dedicated structure to the division schools, and typically it runs, just like basic machine gunners courses for non-0331s and non-infantrymen and some things like that, field skills courses for non-03s, but I think what was clear was the service was not, the trends in contemporary conflict, particularly with respect to unmanned systems, and then the implications on signature management based on the ubiquitous, surveillance that's on, from space layer to the aerial layer to terrestrial layer, et cetera. There were some real risks that we were running across the force, and some foundational things that I thought would jeopardize our ability to protect the force and fight effectively. And so, and the service I know was looking at that stuff at the 30,000 foot level, but it wasn't really finding its way downstream quick enough. So we stood up a couple of courses there at division schools and tried to scale rapidly. One was an unmanned systems course.
Okay.
Not so much focused on training the operator, but focused on how do you use unmanned systems to help quarterback a combined arms solution to a problem. How do you use them to find and designate targets? How do you get digital firing solutions using, all the different assets you have by maximizing the utility of the unmanned systems that were available to us? And so kind of the fist leader approach to how do we get better at using these? And then a signature management course, which was looking at signature management across different elements of spectrum. So how do we make ourselves harder to target, not just like in the electromagnetic spectrum, in the EOIR spectrum, et cetera. And in that one, we built a lot on second MARDIV, and Cal Worth there had done some really good work to stand up a course there at second MARDIV. So on the SIGMAN course, we had a round to shift off of. But those were a couple of, I thought, things that you try to do as a division commander to sort of help set conditions for success. I would say the first big challenge was, quite frankly, destructive behaviors. I think in my entire career up to that point, I had one suicide in a unit that I was a part of. And when I checked into 1st Marine Division, we had 6 in the first 8 weeks I was there.
Oh, that's devastating.
It was. Yeah. And it was like just body blow. Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And it was like getting punched in the face. And it was different units, different demographics, different geography, different MOSs. And the first thing, of course, you do is look for patterns. Like, where's the pattern here, and how do I get in front of it? And there was no obvious pattern. It were standard first term male Marines generally, but other than that, it was really challenging. And I was lucky that I had a great boss and mentor, General George Smith.
Sure.
Because it's the kind of thing when you talk, to succeed, I always tell people to hit the long ball in the Marine Corps, you got to be both good and lucky.
That's true.
You kind of control, the good part to the best of your natural abilities, work hard, give a crap. But the lucky part, sometimes it's just a function of your timing and circumstances and who your boss is, et cetera. There are probably folks that would have fired me for, even though, we were working as hard as we could to get out in front of that. We took it took time. We took a hard look. We were able to, to change the trajectory of that. And it wasn't the last suicide, those 6, but we were able to kind of change the frequency and course of that. But we did implement some changes within the division to try to help move the needle in that space.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you're at that point, you were a 2-star general. What does mentoring other officers look like as a general officer? Do you do much of that?
Sure. Yeah. I don't think it's that fundamentally different. Sometimes it's a little, you're dealing with folks that are, you're not very different in age, general officers are within a few years, give or take. So I think, there's obviously, generally not a lot of yelling and screaming, and it's more of a collegial conversation. But I've always been, I don't save stuff up for big counseling sessions, I say things when I see them. So if there's something good, something bad, I generally hit that pitch right away.
Right.
Instead of waiting to husband everything for a fit rep counseling or something else. And so I try to make it conversational. But yeah, when I think somebody is not fully, is not moving fast enough, is not fully embraced my intent, or doesn't quite understand what I'm looking for, or something like that, to include general officers, the first thing I do is give them a call and try to sit down, have a cup of coffee, and say, hey, look, man, I need you to, how do you see this? Because the way I see this is, and you're not really in the 10 ring right now, and I need you to be better. And
yeah,
and the real sign of maturity, it also gives you a great sense of pulse on folks in terms of evaluation. How well do they take? The more senior you get, the less criticism you tend to get, right?
Right, yeah.
And that can lead
Nobody's standing up saying you want to wear these railroad tracks.
Yeah, that's right. That can lead to hubris. And
right.
So, you're looking for engaged conversation, folks who have the humility to say, okay, I got it, I understand what you're saying. And,
Right.
the confidence to articulate their position, but the humility to take into account the critique.
What's you're transitioning out of the training education now. What are some things left to be optimized there? What's working really well? If you had another year, what would you keep optimizing?
I think areas that we're still challenged. I think we've done some really good work in the drone training space, particularly riding off of Scott Cuomo and Tony Henderson, Mike Brooks. Scott Cuomo in particular has done some remarkable work pulling the service forward and blowing through obstacles, policy and procedural obstacles, in helping us to set up a framework for drone training at scale. The challenge is going to be, TCOM is it's hard as a brick and mortar institution, right?
Right.
We field systems, we, establish TNR standards, we develop POI, programs of instruction. It's a very deliberate process to get to a validated program of instruction, to teach something that you're going to continue to teach and evaluate methodically over years and years and years. I mean, this stuff is moving so fast, software-defined capabilities, and that as an institution, how do we get more agile? Yeah. And it's going to take, there are still some things that brick and mortar approach works, but there are other things that, that it may just be e-learning online. It may be OJT. It may just be that there are certain things that require foundational skills. Like we don't teach somebody how to operate a PRIC 163. We teach them radio wave propagation and coding and wiring and a bunch of different foundational skills. And then the radio itself is going to change, and they learn that kind of on the job when they get out. I mean, I don't know, but I think there's a much more agile approach to learning that we've got to continue to fight for. And then I think classification is another thing. Is the Joint Force really fights at the TS level? Yeah. And a lot of, and at the low end, it's really the secret level at which we're executing our sport coordination, et cetera. And just acts, clearances, classified spaces, access to systems and capabilities at the classified level. TCOM wasn't built for that. Yeah, we're growing into that space, but it takes money and it takes time. And so to really train to that all domain combined arms fight as part of a joint force, we've got to continue to improve the infrastructure that allows us to train at a classified level. Yeah,
we're wrapping up. Last question. As a 3-star general, I mean, you seem pretty handled. You've got an aide and a driver and all those kind of things. How do you stay connected to the corporals? Like, you just can't wander around, How do you manage to stay, how do you get in front of the men and women that we love, which are the Marines of the Marine Corps? How do you do that?
It's not easy. I mean, the more senior you get, the more protectors, as you described, are there. And they're not doing it for bad reasons. They're just trying to make sure you're using your time efficiently.
Only 24 hours in a day.
It's not wasted by stuff that's just raw and unfiltered and doesn't have, you're not, chasing squirrels. But it makes it hard. And so I don't know. I try to maintain a network. Both in and out of uniform. I still talk to a number of folks who were Lance Corporals in my first rifle platoon. And,
that's cool.
So you get a little bit of like the veteran perspective of how the Marine Corps looks from the outside in. I still try to maintain professional relationships and friendships with folks that I've served with over the years that can give a little bit of balance and perspective. But also I try to get in front of groups. I talk to every IOC class. I talk to every commander's course of prospective 05 and 06 commanders. And try to sort of take the temperature down and just sort of have a conversation on kind of here's some things I think you should know, what's on your mind, and be as raw and authentic as I can be in those conversations. But it's not easy. General Neller was probably the best at it of anybody I've ever seen, and he used to drive his staff crazy because he can. I can remember when I was the CO of CG at Camp Lejeune, I was out for a run. This was right after Hurricane Florence. I had just come back from Afghanistan, taken over for Dale Alford. Dale had gone to Afghanistan to take my place. And I'm out for a run, and the first thing in the morning, it's like 06. And my cell phone rings, and I answer it, and it's General Neller. He's like, hey, how come the staff sergeant at 2154 Florida Ave doesn't have, running water right now? And I was like, Commandant, good morning. I'll find out, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Click.
Yeah.
Because he just had this broad network. And he wasn't obviously doing that for every staff sergeant, but he was making a point, right?
Sure.
Right. Do you know that this kind of thing is going on, and this is the level at which I expect you to be paying attention?
Yeah, that's a great story. Well, 3MEF, very exciting.
Thanks. Pretty excited.
Wishing you all the luck. I'm sure that'll be a whole set of future questions I would have for you. But what an exciting command going to being a MEF commander. I mean, that's really great.
This is like the fourth time in my career and third time as a general officer. I'm coming in behind Roger Turner, and it's always a great place to be.
Yeah,
he's extraordinary. So,
what's the one question I didn't ask you?
You didn't ask about like first time I really screwed something up, and how did
we've only got 5 minutes left, sir. I don't. Can we squeeze it in, or
if you got the time? I mean, you can use it or not.
Yes, Major Shell's gonna scream and yell,
fine.
But okay.
I'll give you two quick.
You pull rank on him.
Yeah, one was rifle platoon commander back then. It was pretty simple. You had 1, 39, and 1. One officer, 39 enlisted, one corpsman. So you had 40 rifles, 1 pistol, 10 compasses, 1 Prick 77, 3 Prick 68 squad radios. That was it. That was your equipment density list. And at the time, the most important thing in the world was keeping account of your equipment. To my leadership, they were. And we had gone ashore as part of, we were doing a MEU exercise before we deployed. We had flown ashore, done a raid. We were, a helicopter raid, come back to the ship and, mech raid, come back to the ship. And my folks, platoon sergeant, everybody, we're all up. We got all our gear. So I reported that to company commander. He reports to battalion commander, good to go. Half hour later, one of my sergeants comes up with the platoon sergeant. He says, sir, we're actually missing a radio. And I'm like, oh man, how did that happen?
Radio?
Yeah, radio. One of the Prick 68 radios, about the size of an MRE. And I'm like, oh my God. So I go up to the company commander's stateroom, same guy, the railroad tracks, and knock on the hatch, and he's lying in the rack and, resting. And I said, sir, we're missing a radio. And he full on launched himself out of the rack at me, you better. And I didn't even wait to hear it. I just slammed the door and took off.
Okay.
And I grabbed the sergeant. I was like, where the hell do you think you left the thing? And he says, well, I think what happened is, the old pack had 3 outer pouches, because I think I reached to feel for the radio, and I think what I felt was an MRE. I thought it was the radio. So the radio must be on the deck there where we were doing, setting a 360, waiting for the helicopters to come in. And
okay.
So I ran down to the flight deck, and I went up to the little toll booth they call helicopter control, and I went up to the Navy lieutenant. And I said, I don't know what you have, what you got to do, but you got to get me a ride, back to LZ Eagle or whatever.
Right.
And figuring it's never going to happen, but he does a little bit of magic and says, hey, if you can go now, we got a helicopter coming in 5 minutes. It's doing a supply run ashore. They can drop you on the way. You're only going to have 10 minutes on the deck though. Otherwise, you're not getting a ride back to the ship.
Right.
I grabbed the sergeant. We hit the helicopter into the LZ, found the radio, got back to the ship.
Oh,
and I guess it felt a lot more dramatic at the time. But I guess the lesson that I took from it was, you just gotta, what you're expected to do as a leader is just solve the problem.
Right.
Just solve the problem. I mean, figure out a way to solve the problem.
Right. Well, you knew enough to go up and see if you could get a ride somewhere from there.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought, the other one was, we took the company to the field on the weekend, and something we didn't want to do, but we didn't have priority for any ranges, and the only time we could get a company reinforced live fire range on the weekend at Camp Lejeune was on a holiday weekend. So we took the whole company to the field on the weekend. We were going to give them comp time. We do all rehearsals on Saturday. We're ready to go live on Sunday morning. Sunday morning, the company gunny comes up to me and he goes, sir, we got a problem. He goes, all our machine gun ammunition is blank. And I'm like, how the hell did that happen? And he goes, I don't know how it happened, but we were seated for it. We didn't catch it. I thought we ordered live ammunition, but so we got the whole company.
Ooh.
The whole reason we brought them was because this is the only time we can do live fire, and all
fire.
our machine gun ammunition is blank ammo. That was company XO, and I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, this is important enough to me as a lieutenant. It really doesn't matter how you solve the problem. last lesson is context, but you got to solve the problem. And so I called the battalion commander, Lieutenant Watson, called the battalion commander at home on Sunday morning and said, "Sir, I own this, but we got a company of Marines in the field with blank ammunition, and the only way we're going to get live ammunition to replace it over the weekend is if you sign an 03 priority, and we could take that to the ASP. Would you do it?" And it was Colonel Chris Gunther.
Oh,
and
wow.
And he
Okay.
did. And
That's
I thought,
great.
okay, this isn't going to go well for me. Like, he's a great leader. He's going to sign this, and we're going to get the Marines to training, and then I'm going to show up and get fired. And this is probably
Right.
the end of,
Yeah, I'm in for it.
Yeah, the end of Lieutenant Watson, but he never said another word about it. He's great.
Don't you think there's a valuable lesson there, though, about just helping other people solve problems rather than going high into the right? Again, maybe that's a maturity thing again.
Yeah,
You know?
but I mean, as a leader, you're just expected to solve the problem.
Solve the problem,
Yeah.
right? And that's not just officers, right? Like, I've got this whole diatribe I go on about non-commissioned officers are officers, and
Yeah.
you should be leading like that too. But yeah, just solve the problem. So, well, we're out of time.
Okay.
I do have a coin for you. I don't know if you can ever get through TSA with it. I was convinced to try to get this my logo on there. So be careful with that as you go through security. But it's got one of my favorite sayings on there, which is
That's
being a
awesome.
Marine isn't something you do, it's something you are. And
That's a great coin.
yeah, thanks.
That's gonna,
I mean,
that'll
it's
go in my
unique.
office at 3MEF.
I was going to say, I don't know how many coins you have, maybe 4 or 5, but if you got room for that one,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Very much.
So thank you very much for being a guest. I really appreciate
Thanks.
all the insight you gave everybody. So
Yeah.
I will see you again soon, but then I hope to see you again in the future.
Dave, it
as
was an
well.
honor, and it was fun to reminisce a little bit.
Great.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
man.
much.
Appreciate it.